the rules for the debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. Each candidate will have the opportunity to offer a 30-second rebuttal to another candidate's answer. Each candidate may only offer one rebuttal per question. Each candidate will have the opportunity to offer a 15-second clarification to another candidate's rebuttal. Each candidate may only offer one clarification per rebuttal. At the front of the audience, a member of the Elections Commission will provide hand signals to indicate how much time a candidate has left. A 1 will indicate 1 minute, a C will indicate 30 seconds, and a 10-second countdown will be provided. All candidates have reviewed and agreed to the rules prior to this debate. Now, we will begin with 1 minute, 30-second opening statements from each candidate, starting with Jared.
Hi, my name is Jared Castaneda. I'm really excited to see everyone here, seeing some familiar faces. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a third-year political science and sociology major, and I currently serve as the government relations aide for the EVP office. And of course, I want to talk about my campaign platforms and everything I want to do over the next year and how I want to uplift our campus community. But I kind of want to take a step back and kind of talk about the current status of the student body. I'm talking about the students on Ring Road, I'm talking about the students in the audience, and I'm talking about students like myself who feel constantly disempowered and underrepresented in higher education. Our UC in general loves to boast about student diversity, and yet we feel like we do not reap the benefits of many of those status designations, such as Hispanic serving institution and a minority serving institution. And I think a lot of students have had a similar sentiment. And I think overall, because of that, a lot of students have also expressed seeing or wanting to see a new direction in ASUCI, one that actually shows solidarity and one that actually stands beside students, especially within a lot of advocacy campaigns on campus. And so just to reiterate a little bit about myself, I've had 3 years of experience in the office and 1 year of experience as an external chair for my gen, actively listening to students, and I'd love to bring that to EVP also.
Thank you for your opening statement. We will now have a 1 minute, 30-second opening statement from Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a third-year mechanical engineering major here at UCI, and I'm running for EVP because I've seen that ASUCI can do a lot more to represent the students here on campus, and me and the other people in my movement as part of Anita Rising really want to go and make ASUCI and the student body of UCI a better group to be a part of. And we have a threefold plan to do this. One, by fixing the financial aid crisis, which has been a huge problem for so many students who are relying on financial aid in order to continue studying here at this university. Two, to reduce the parking costs. Due to the housing crisis, so many students have to live off campus and are then subjected to outrageously high parking fees and citations. And three, to empower the student government and to promote student wellness here on campus by providing students a safe, wholesome, and mentally well space to study here on campus. And if I'm elected as EVP, I will use the external vice president's power as a lobbyer to go to the higher powers of Congress, like in our state government, in order to make these changes happen here on campus. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements, candidates. Starting off our questions for tonight. In general terms, what is your understanding of the role of external vice president? Adam, may answer this question first.
Hi. So that's a great question. The role of the external vice president, in my view, is to be a representative for the students to external bodies, such as the city council, the state government in Sacramento, and our representatives in Congress. The external vice president has special connections to these higher groups that have more control over the levers of power and can use that connection to enact change and to push the university itself to change in order to be a more effective and supportive group for its students. Thank you.
Jared, the same question. In general terms, what is your understanding of the role of external vice president?
Yeah, of course. So the external vice president does have a really important role, especially when it comes to advocacy efforts. The external vice president oversees the advocacy efforts at the local, regional, statewide, and federal level, and they do a lot of advocacy work. They oversee all the conferences when it comes to student support and student advocacy. For example, you can name the Student Organizing Summit, the Teen Lobby Day, all of our lobby conferences in general. They also serve as campus liaison to other student governments and other student associations nationwide, and they also have many capabilities in basically showing a lot of support to our student body in general. They also, when it comes to like the EVP office as well, they serve as a liaison to meet with administration, especially engaging in these critical conversations such as the regents level, such as the campus-wide level, just meeting with different administrations and enacting policy changes.
Thank you for your responses, candidates. For the remaining questions, if the candidates could also speak closer to the mic so that the audio is caught up by our recording team, that would be amazing. But with that, your next question is, given the pool of candidates running in this election cycle, why are you uniquely qualified for the position of external vice president? What distinguishes you from the other candidate? Jared, you may answer first.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that I really have prided myself in, and one of the things that I think I really held dear to my heart, is the fact that a lot of my experiences, like my life's experiences in general, have shaped my involvements, especially within grassroots mobilizing. As a son to immigrant parents, I understand the difficulties in navigating higher education, feeling disempowered in higher education, especially because our current presidential administration is very hostile to higher education, and because of that, I had several different involvements within grassroots mobilizing. My most important role that I think has shown me a lot of insight into what community building actually is my involvement within MECHA, which is a prominent socio-political org on campus that deals with Latino-based issues, and I think actively engaging with students and having these critical conversations, hosting teach-ins, workshops, going to protests have really shaped my foundation to really get into this role.
Thank you for your response. Adam, same question.
Yeah, so unlike my other candidate who is a political science major, I'm an engineer. I'm an outsider to this aspect of the university, but I feel like that is my greatest strength. I think that people who have been too closely involved with the current ASUCI administration, or people who, I guess, it's not that the university, it's not that ASUCI has done poorly, but that I feel like they've not realized their full potential. And I feel like what ASUCI needs is an outside push and an outside perspective in order to reach that full potential. And so I have experience leading organizations related to engineering and stuff like that, but I think the most important thing is taking a more scientific and more aggressive approach to advocacy than what has currently been done within the administration. Thank you.
What do you believe is the most important issue to the student body, and how would you address it as external vice president? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, so I think right now the most important issue has got to be the financial aid crisis. Last fall quarter, we saw thousands of students who rightfully deserve to receive financial aid through scholarships, grants from the federal and state government, who were denied or delayed in receiving their aid and ended up having their college careers jeopardized because of this. This is completely unacceptable, and I'll use the powers of the external vice president to lobby our higher administration, including our state government and our representatives in Congress and the UC regents, in order to apply pressure onto the UCI administration to fix their financial aid system. We've spoken with representatives from the Office of Financial Aid here, and they have found that the UCI administration has intentionally defunded and understaffed the administration in order to
Your time
reduce.
has lapsed. Jared, you may answer this question as next. What do you believe is the most important issue to the student body, and how would you address it as external vice president?
Yeah, of course. So I think this comes in a variety of forms, but I think the biggest issue for UCI students is the fact that a lot of students are being disenfranchised throughout the UC system and throughout UC institutions. We see this with how the UC and the regents and their decisions to not support undocumented students, for example. And we see this as almost a threat to higher education. It just comes in a lot of forms, as I was saying, inaccessibility, the lack of transparency within student government. That's why I also want to establish town halls in general and have quarterly town halls, because student government is generally inaccessible to students and they are not being able to be involved when it comes to advocacy work and getting that established. I think also a lot of our CEOs are not in contact with us because we haven't made those consistent efforts, and because of that, students are being disenfranchised because they aren't involved in
Time
our
to elapse.
mobilization efforts.
Thank you for your responses. Moving on to questions about the responsibilities of the external vice president. The external vice president serves as the primary liaison to the UC regents and the UC office of the president. What items would you prioritize when communicating with these bodies? Jared, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, of course. So after being in contact with a lot of student organizations and a lot of student-led movements, I think one of the biggest ones is student protester safety. I feel like a lot of students who dissent any of the opinions that are currently in the status quo are really being suppressed, and student voices are generally being silenced. So I think that's definitely something that I would bring up, especially engaging in these critical discussions. And because the UC has decided to purchase more weapons to further silence students across the UC system after protesting last year. I think something else that I would also bring to the regents is the fact that a lot of students feel like they are being pushed out of the UC system, especially when it comes to diversity initiatives and the overall feeling disempowered in higher education, especially because the UC pushes an affordability and housing crisis, and therefore a lot of students are disproportionately dropping out, especially within our most vulnerable communities. I think I really have to bring issues to that as well.
Adam, the same question.
Yeah, I think Jared makes a good point, especially about that affordability crisis. And that's why I want to hammer back in on this financial aid crisis as the issue that affects the largest portion of the student population and has the most impact on the student population, rather than individual small groups. Most students within the UC system receive some form of financial aid. And so it's really important to, like he said, contact the UC Regents in order to get the higher UC Regents administration to push back against UCI administration's intentional efforts to underfund and understaff the Office of Student Financial Aid in order to reduce the amount of student financial aid that students receive and thus create greater profits for the university. And that's why in all efforts, I will be focused singularly on this issue and also other important issues.
Thank you for your responses. Your next question is: the external vice president serves as the primary liaison to local, state, and national elected officials working to have student interests reflected in policy. What items would you prioritize when communicating with these individuals? Adam, you may start first.
Yeah, so on the local level, I feel like the best way that our Orange County government and our Irvine State government can help students at UCI is to improve the public transportation system here. We love OC Transportation Authority and their not very frequent bus service. By improving the bus service at the county and in the local level, we can allow students who do not have cars but are still forced off campus due to the housing crisis to be able to reach the university without having to pay exorbitant fees and without having to purchase a car with money that is already a major issue for them due to the financial aid crisis as well. All these issues compound together, and that's why they all need to be treated not just as individual issues, but as one singular issue which comes from the prioritization of profits over student well-being. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course. So at the local level, I think I would focus on dismantling voter suppression tactics. At the local level, I feel like students have inadequate access to voting and civic engagement initiatives. And I think one of the things that I would really focus on and hammer down next year is establishing a vote coalition and empowering RCOs to really be involved within the voting processes. This includes hosting teach-ins, workshops, and expanding that RCO outreach, because a lot of candidates will campaign on ASUCI being inaccessible but not offer ASUCI as a source of collaboration. So I think that's a big issue, and this would help this would help in general fund RCOs. I think also establishing a second voting center on campus would really help in our advocacy work and getting students civically engaged, and not having to wait a bunch of hours just to fulfill their civic duties. Something that I would focus on at the California level, which I actually lobbied for in Sacramento recently, would be expanding the Cal Grant Equity Framework and allowing more students to be eligible
Your
for
time is
financial aid
elapsed.
protections.
Might I offer a rebuttal?
Yes, you may.
30 seconds, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to address the idea that voting, just expanding voting access in one of the states that already has one of the most useful voting systems, like we all have mail-in ballots. I don't see how this is going to go and help solve these issues, especially since as EVP, we will be serving in a term that is not an election year. And so how would this actually help students with the issues that they are facing right now?
Time is elapsed.
Can I offer a rebuttal to that?
You may offer a 15-second clarification.
For a 15-second clarification, a lot of students are still currently disempowered, and RCOs will still remain not in contact with ASUCI. And also, California does not actually have the most efficient voting processes, especially when it comes to reaching out to students and having a bunch of our
Your time is
constituents be
elapsed.
disempowered.
Will the other candidate also like to provide a rebuttal to the question, or?
I thought we only get one.
You get one rebuttal per question per candidate.
Oh, I see.
So if you would like to offer a rebuttal, you may do so, otherwise we move on to the next question.
We can move on to the next question.
Move on to the next question, of course.
The external vice president serves on the UC Student Association, a governing body composed of all the UC student body external vice presidents and members of their staff. The following is a two-part question. What is your understanding of the UC Student Association, its organizational relationship with ASUCI, and how it informs the work of the external vice president? Jared, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, of course. So the UC Student Association is an organization and a student-led organization actually that encompasses over 240,000 undergraduate courses across the 9 UC institutions in California. So the UCSA overall handles a lot of our advocacy work, especially when it comes to external organizing. The UC, for example, the UCSA oversees all of our lobby days, all of our advocacy days, all of our budget days, and it even oversees our student organizing summit. So it oversees a lot of our campaigns and work that we do, especially to get the ground running when it comes to a lot of our involvements. They also have different campaigns overall when it comes to different issues, and they're tasked with doing that and addressing that in the sense that they have their own commissions, such as like the Choir campaign, the C campaigns, and the UC We Vote campaign, which overall focuses on voter engagement. So they do a lot of external work.
Your time has
at the
elapsed.
state level.
Adam, same question. What is your understanding of the UC Student Association, its organizational relationship with ASUCI, and how it informs the work of the external vice president?
Yeah, as a student association that encompasses the entire UC system with hundreds of thousands of members, like Jared said, it's definitely a very important office and an important part of the UC Student Council system. But I do feel like its influence is a little overstated. I think that while the campaigns and lobby days that they organize are very important and definitely should continue, I think that a better way to affect change is to create personal relationships between members of ASUCI, the executive branch of ASUCI, and the people in power within our local, state, and federal government in order to lobby them personally to enact these changes. I think that while these individual days are a great way to show support from a lot of people, it's difficult to show support for a single important issue using
Your
them.
time is elapsed. In the past, ASUCI has had a tenuous relationship with UCSA. What do you envision ASUCI's relationship with UCSA to be moving forward? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, like I said, I think while UCSA is important and it's important to be on good terms with them, it's also important to stand on our own as UCI in our relationship with the UC administration, with the UC regents, and with other state, local, federal governments. And that's why I'm hoping to, as EVP, represent a more independent and, dare I say, self-interested, but not interested in ASUCI, but in the students at UCI in our relationships. So that way we are not entirely dependent on UCSA in our relationships and in lobbying. Because while I think they do serve a very important role, I also think that it's important that we stand up for ourselves when it comes to representing ourselves, because no one holds UC students as more important than UC students ourselves. And that's why I think that we should be representing ourselves first and foremost. Thank you.
Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course. For me, I think I would actually focus on strengthening our relationship with the UC Student Association. And while yes, they do oversee a lot of our advocacy work, we do it in collaboration with them. For example, with Latino Lobby Day, we hosted a town hall and we gained real student feedback from UCI voices, and that's why I kind of want to also incorporate a lot of our town halls and expand on how many town halls we actually have to really strengthen our relationship with the UC Student Association. We do a lot of work with them actually, especially when it comes to collaboration and advocacy days, whether it comes to our student lobby conference, etc. And while yes, we have had a strenuous relationship in the past, we have been very vocal on why it has been strenuous, and the UC Student Association has been working with us directly to really fix those issues. And overall, we have to maintain our relationship with them because that's a lot of the advocacy work that we do.
May I offer a rebuttal?
Yes, 30 seconds.
I actually really like Jared's idea of doing more town halls so that way students get a chance to have their voices heard when it comes to ASUCI. What I just don't see is why do we have to rely on the UC Student Association in order to do them? Why can't we as ASUCI organize ourselves to host our own town halls catering to UCI's needs specifically? I think that it's just a question of why can't we do this ourselves? We can, we have the money and we should.
Time is lost.
Now, for a clarification,
Of course.
we actually do it ourselves. For example, when it came to the Latino Lobby Day Town Hall, that was hosted by ourselves and led by ourselves. And while yes, we do provide our things and feedback to the UC Student Association, after being 3 years in office, I can confirm that we are not living on that.
Jay, would you like to also offer a rebuttal, or would you like to move on to the next question?
Next question, please.
Of course. The next question is, the external vice president leads delegations of UCI students to a number of important conferences and lobbying trips. The following is a 3-part question. First, what specific experience do you have with lobbying local, state, or national officials, and how would it inform your lobbying efforts? Jared, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, of course. So I actually like to pride myself in the fact that I've been involved and I've had a lot of extensive lobbying experience, especially when it comes to advocating for student needs and expanding a lot of student protections, expanding financial aid in general, expanding a lot of accessibility, expanding and safeguarding those rights that students are currently subject to removal from. And so I've gone to at least 4 or 5 lobby conferences, each with different themes, and I've generally been informed by what to do and how to handle these lobby days because I do a lot of student outreach and I actually am on the ground level speaking to students, hosting these town halls, reaching out to RCOs, and really getting that real student feedback. So I think that's something that I really pride myself in, and being on the ground and actually communicating with students. And I've lobbied for a lot of things before. One of the things is expanding the Cal Grant and expanding a lot of protections
Time
for
is
student
elapsed.
protesters.
Adam, same question.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Of course. The question is, what specific experience do you have with lobbying local, state, or national officials, and how would it inform your lobbying efforts?
Yeah, so I've been upfront that I'm an outsider to the political arena. I don't have any particular experience in lobbying. What I do have was my position and my current position as a corporate outreach chair with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, which is a group that does a lot of lobbying, not to governments, but to corporations. I spent a lot of time developing relationships with corporations in the aerospace industry and other engineering industries in order to promote efforts such as more climate-based and more like carbon-efficient fuel systems for jet aircraft and rockets, and also hosting conferences, even a conference that we hosted here at ASUCI highlighting research in such fields. Thank you.
Your next question is, how would you ensure these opportunities are accessible and inclusive of students from all backgrounds, especially those with no prior advocacy experience? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, I think that everyone can be an advocate. I think that it's within all of us, within ourselves, to be an advocate. What we need is the push to actually go out there and do it. And that's why, as EVP, I feel like our role is not just to be a leader, but to be an inspiration to the students in order to get them not to just advocate for them, but to get them to advocate for themselves. I think that a lot of students are kind of just fed up with the political system in this current day and age, and they feel like they can't really make an effort to change that. And so I feel like ASUCI and EVP can, through practice, right, by showing them what a good student government can look like, I hope that we can show students we can inspire students to want better from their actual government as well. Thank you.
Jared, same question. How would you ensure these opportunities are accessible and inclusive of students from all backgrounds, especially those with no prior advocacy experience?
Yeah, of course. For me, it's a lot about doing targeted outreach, and I feel like I've had a lot of experience with this, especially going to my third year under the government relations office. Something that I've seen, or something that had actually worked, is doing a lot, especially because I'm part of MECHA, which is a Latino-based socio-political org, and I was getting the message out to a lot of Latino students and promoting these events. And I think having that targeted outreach would be very beneficial to a lot of our underrepresented students, whether it comes to student parents or students of color. So just having that streamlined communication. I definitely want to have that streamlined communication, especially when it comes to emails or setting up group chats with a lot of our RCO leaders and doing that group chat. Doing that work on the ground, getting that running. Something that I did this year, of course, is talk about doing outreach to Latino students, doing outreach to Black students, doing outreach to a lot of our already marginalized and vulnerable communities, and staying in that
Your time is
context.
up. Thank you for your responses. For identity-based conferences such as the African Black Coalition Conference, Black Student Lobby Day, Latina Student Lobby Day, and more, how would you collaborate with campus and statewide partners, particularly identity-based organizations, to ensure UCI's presence reflects shared community values, uplifts student leadership, and strengthens our outreach? Jared, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, of course, and I think this is something I saw with Latino Lobby Day in general. So what I did was I started off at the local level. When I actually helped coordinate Latino Lobby Day myself. And in getting that groundwork running, I reached out to the Latinx Resource Center. And I think by having, and just reaching out to like the people that you're actually affecting, the people you're actually advocating for, is a really resourceful thing. And of course, we don't really see that because ASUCI generally tends to have a gap between itself and the student body. But that's something that I did, and because of that, we had a lot more turnout than we did in our first lobby day. So that's how I would start at the local level. At the statewide level, I would look into different committees, such as the higher education committees at the state level. We've already worked with them with the UC Student Association, and they've actually co-sponsored some of our legislation that we've done and that we've tried to lobby for at Latino Lobby Day. So just maintaining those relationships and reaching out to a lot of nonprofits in the area.
Your time has elapsed. Adam, same question.
Yeah, I think as part of my vision of having students not just be advocated for and actually advocate for themselves, I'd like to get more involvement and to have our own campus student organizations like the Latino Student Union, like the Black Student Union, to be more leaders in directing and getting what they want out of lobbying for the students here on campus. Because I feel like more in the course of ASUCI, I feel like these organizations tend to represent their students better than the ASUCI as a whole does. And so I'd like to see ASUCI leadership more focused on issues that impact the whole university, such as financial aid, the parking, campus safety. And I'd like to see ASUCI more as a supporter and in empowering and uplifting local student organizations like the LSU, like the BSU, in their own lobbying for these lobby days. Thank you.
The next question is, executive officers of ASUCI have broad authority to propose new positions and redefine existing ones to best fulfill the needs of the undergraduate student body. What new positions, if any, would you propose? What positions, if any, would you redefine? Adam, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think as part of my focus on the financial aid crisis here at UCI, I'd like to create a new body as a kind of auditory board for the Office of Student Financial Aid in order to have students actually go in there and see what's going on there. So that way we can have greater transparency and students know what's actually happening to the money that is owed, not just promised, but owed to them by their government. And so I feel like creating a system such as this with support from higher level halls of power like the UC Regents and the state government can allow students to get a much better outcome when it comes to their financial aid. And that's why I think that creating this auditing board for the Office of Student Financial Aid here at UCI would be a really great idea. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course. So there would be two positions actually that I would like to introduce to the office or reintroduce formally. One of them being the local affairs coordinator. Well, yes, we do this would fall under the government relations committee, commission. And we did have this our first year, but it was removed recently as of this year. But because of that, we haven't been able to coordinate our efforts as much at the local level as much as we would want to, especially when it comes to a lot of our mobilization efforts. So I would reintroduce that. That way we can still continue to have our organized efforts when it comes to coordinating our businesses to local city council meetings and when it comes to local city council issues. One of the other things that I would also like to introduce to our office would be a UC divestment coordinator. Our institution currently funds or continues to engage in a lot of war profiteering, and because of that, I would like to introduce a coordinator to really address this issue and provide
Your time has
investment to
lapsed.
students.
I'd like to provide a rebuttal.
We provide a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, in regard to the UCI investment coordinator, I like to see if there's actual support from the student population for this. Right? Who is this actually serving? Shouldn't ASUCI be focused not on supporting an individual political movement, but on the student body as a whole? I don't see how this kind of divestment, which is only going to reduce the funds available to the university, is going to help students as a whole. And I don't think it represents a representative student body for ASUCI.
Can I offer a clarification?
May I offer a 15-second clarification?
Yeah, of course. So there are many forms in our investment portfolios that we can invest in, which is why divestment calls for actual reinvestment and not just taking out the funds of these students. But our portfolio has a lot of contracts with gun manufacturers, which currently perpetuate current agenda. So that's what I
Your
want
time
to
has
invest in
elapsed.
students.
Would you like to offer a 30-second rebuttal, Jared? Or move on to the next
I'm just
question?
gonna move on to the next question.
Moving on to questions about subject areas traditionally under the external president's portfolio, external vice president's portfolio. The external vice president advocates for the affordability, accessibility, equity, and diversity of higher education at the local, UC-wide, statewide, and federal levels. Given that they do not directly address on-campus issues specific to UCI, how would you ensure that the voices and priorities of UCI students are effectively represented and heard in these broader advocacy spaces? Jared, you may answer first.
Yeah, of course. And I think I've gotten a lot of the groundwork on foundation. I try to set the foundation, especially when it comes to connecting with a lot of socio-political orgs on campus. So one of them being connecting a lot more with RCOs. I know the UCI, UCI as a whole and as a university does not typically reflect traditional UC campuses in the sense that a lot of students affiliate themselves with their orgs instead of affiliating themselves particularly with that university. So I want to establish a streamlined communication. I want a streamlined set of communication between RCOs and us. I think that's something that I've started to do, especially with my position in Metro and seeing that overlap and providing and expanding and spreading awareness on a lot of our initiatives and a lot of our money days and a lot of the things that we do. And so overall, just actually reaching out to our students and being able to actively listen to them instead of using them.
Adam, same question.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
How would you ensure that the voices and priorities of UCI students are effectively represented and heard in these broader advocacy spaces?
Yeah, I think that a big part of this, like Jared said, is building relationships with the student body as a whole. I think that, like I said before, I think that student organizations have the capability, if we empower them, to be better advocates for their specific groups than we can as a group that's representing the whole university. And so I'd like to see ASUCI build relationships with a lot of these local student organizations that support diversity, equity, and inclusion in order to empower them to build relationships with those in the higher levels of power in order to promote this in a way that benefits those groups of students. I think that by doing this, we can allow students to become representatives for themselves and to also help them achieve the goals that they want from their experience here at university.
A number of rising concerns in the field of higher education at the state and federal level would affect your term as external vice president. The following is a three-part question. What do you believe is the greatest concern in the field of higher education at the state and federal level, and how would you address it as external vice president? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, I believe that for the last 30-something years, the fastest growing issue has been cost. Students are being forced to take going into crippling student debt. They're relying on financial aid, and profits have just ballooned for our university system without the quality of education being improved. And so I feel as the EVP, the one issue that we can do, that we can fix to help the most students the most, is to help lower these costs. That's why I've spoken a lot on financial aid. I'd also like to speak a little more on parking. Due to the housing crisis, many students have been forced off campus, and so they have to buy cars and drive and buy parking permits. And if they can't afford a parking permit, they end up getting charged outrageous fees whenever they are quote unquote caught. I think that this can be resolved through an amnesty program for students who commit first-time violations of parking, as well as a reduce in parking costs overall. Thank you.
Jared, same question.
Could you repeat it one more time?
What do you believe is the greatest concern in the field of higher education at the state and federal level, and how would you address it as external vice president?
Yeah, of course. I think I kind of said it earlier, but I think overall it's the disempowerment of students. A lot of student voices are being suppressed, especially right now with a lot of visa revocations for students expressing their own points of views. So I think that's something that I would want to bring up. And of course, disempowerment comes in different ways. It comes through our UC portfolio, it comes through legislation that actively targets our most marginalized communities. And because of that, I want to organize and work together. And I was saying kind of earlier, establishing this quarterly town halls to actually communicate with students, to actually talk to them about what their biggest issues are, and how us and the UC Student Association can go to the Capitol and fund efforts to really support them, especially when it comes to higher education bills, expanding Cal Grant access, expanding a bunch of access and student protections at the state and federal level. I would also like to mobilize at the regions level for different issues, of course, pertaining to regions-based issues. But that's
Thank you for your response. Your next question is, what is your position on rising concerns in the field of higher education surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how would you integrate it into your administration's advocacy? Jared, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, of course. So something that I want to do is start from the inside out, of course, doing a lot of outreach to a lot of students who may have not traditionally heard of it when it comes to ASUCI and getting involved within advocacy and getting involved in advocacy space. I don't know, you could start off with like student parents, for example, because our office has done outreach and has done collaborations with them. But starting off with different demographics that can really support them. Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course, timekeeper, how much time is remaining?
32 seconds.
You'll have 32 seconds remaining for your response. The question is, what is your position on rising concerns in the field of higher education surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how would you integrate it into your administration's advocacy?
Yeah, of course, and I think outside of that, going out, I think overall, like our diversity initiatives are very much under attack. A lot of institutions have overall rolled back their diversity initiatives, and I think that's something that's completely wrong. And it's something I want to lobby for at the state and at the federal level. And I know we talked about a lot of the equitable initiatives that I brought to the capital, not lobbied for personally myself. And I think overall, continue putting a lot of pressure and mobilizing a bunch of students, putting pressure on UCI admin at the Regents level. And
Two times the last. Same question.
Yeah, diversity, I think, is one of UCI's greatest strengths. As someone from a mixed race background, it's definitely something that's comforted me a lot in my experience here at UCI. And I think that it's super important that as EVP, as ASUCI, we stand up and defend students who are being targeted by initiatives from the federal government. Luckily, California is our main source of funding, so we have some safeguards against that, but we still need to do way more to protect students, trans students, LGBT students, students of color, from these frankly racist attacks against our higher education. I don't think that this is really acceptable, and so I think that we need to take a stand at the state level to create a bulwark within California against these kinds of attacks from the federal government, which are likely going to continue for the next
Thank you for
3
your
or 4
response.
years.
Ken and Adam, I would remind you to please keep within your assigned
I apologize.
Thank you.
Your next question is, how would you engage students with the important issues of the day and the legislative solutions at the forefront of your administration's advocacy? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, I'd like to see more students getting involved in the local government level, because I feel like this is the one that impacts our life here at UCI actually the most. Things like housing regulations and zoning laws. I feel I've contributed are one of the biggest contributors to housing costs, which is one of the fastest rising elements of cost that students have to deal with here within the UC system. And so I'd like to create initiatives to get students more involved, not just in higher level politics like the midterms and the general elections, but also within the local, county, and state level politics as well, in order to support bills and referendums that would help the students here as a whole, because I think that a lot of students kind of just are not involved in this level of politics, and if they were, we could fix a lot of the issues that are occurring at a local and state level. Thank you.
Jared, same question. How would you engage students with the most important issues of the day and the legislative solutions at the forefront of your administration's advocacy?
Yeah, of course. I think as the EVP, you have a lot of power in the sense that you can use a lot of outlets of communication. One of them, I would like to reintroduce campus-wide email updates. I haven't seen them since, I believe, my first year, and I think that would provide a lot of transparency, especially because we're reaching out to an entire campus. Two, I would also like to establish town halls, as I was saying, establishing quarterly town halls to link administration and students and to kind of ease student concerns, especially when it comes to financial aid, when it comes to parking, when it comes to a lot of these big UCI issues. Something that I'd also like to do well, I kind of do it already within my orgs and within my involvements, but being involved with and being in touch and setting meetings with a lot of our advocacy boards, and I know a lot of them, after speaking and having a lot of conversations with them, have expressed interest in mobilizing at the UC Regents level, and that's something I will try and reallocate funds for next year. Funding these trips, those students can actually voice
Time has elapsed. Thank you for your response. How would you support the student body's right to advocate for themselves in the face of potential opposition or adversity from entities such as the UC Regents, the UC Office of the President, and local, state, or federal legislative bodies? Jared, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's why the EVP office will play a very pivotal and critical role next year, especially when it comes to setting up the groundwork for the midterms, and that's why I kind of focus my efforts on reclaiming our civic power and reclaiming the ability to actually engage in these initiatives, and especially because a lot of our democratic ideals are under threat currently. So I would focus a lot on our voter engagement and our voter registration drives, which is something we've had a lot of success with in the past, especially because the 9 UCs compete with each other actually and try and get out the vote. And that's why I also want to facilitate the ease of this process by establishing and working with the Orange County Board of Supervisors to establish a second on-campus voting center to allow students to really be involved. I'd also like to, of course, establish the vote coalition, and I'd also like to provide campus-wide email updates and invite students to a lot of our student
Your time has
messages.
elapsed. Adam, same question.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty obvious from what I've been saying this entire last hour or so that I feel like empowering students to advocate for themselves is absolutely something that we need to do, and I think it's a hugely important part of what the EVP needs to do, and something that kind of hasn't been done over the last few years within the EVP. And so I think that the best way to do this is to reach out to other orgs on campus and to collaborate with them in order to have them empower their students within those orgs. Because I think that when you just send out an email from like ASUCI, people just throw that in the bin, they don't look at it. But when they hear something at their general meetings, at their club meetings, at their board retreats, etc., that's something that they actually listen to, that's something they feel is important. And so I think that by outreaching to these organizations and having them outreach to their students, I think that we could see a lot more success in getting students involved and advocate for themselves. Thank you.
And this is your final reminder to stay within the time limit as assigned. Please note that continued failure to not abide by our time limits will result in an applicable sanction from the Elections Commission.
The next question is, returning to the topic of UCSA. UCSA is composed of 5 standing campaigns: Acquire, Fund the UC, Students Enacting Environmental Defense, Racial Justice Now, and UC We Vote. How would you engage UCS students in these campaigns to ensure their success and collaborate with UCSA for meaningful change within the UC system as a whole?
Adam, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, I think that this comes down to like ground level work, I feel. I think that for UCSA's greatest strength is just their ability to reach a large number of people. And I think that we can collaborate with them to do this in order to reach larger groups of people. And I think that the best way to do that is to create a relationship between students and the UCSA. I think that most of your average students probably doesn't even know what they do. I think a lot of average students probably don't even know what ASUCI does. And I think that by getting them more involved with efforts by the UCSA, it will be very helpful to their and to our goals, which I may have dogged on them a little bit. I do think that we have a lot in common in terms of our goals, and in this situation, it's something where we can really collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course, and I think our office has done overall a pretty good job at facilitating these campaigns, especially when it comes to communication with the UC Student Association and what their goals are and how we can further align ourselves with certain goals. I think by starters, I would definitely want to start outreach and collaborate with a lot of our resource centers. I feel like a lot of our resource centers are kind of overlooked in the sense that ACCI does not do a lot of outreach to them in general. That's why I kind of wanted it. That's why this year, for example, for the Latina Lobby Day Town Hall, I did a collaboration with the Latinas Resource Center, and that definitely got a lot more students involved than previous years. I think something that we could also utilize, of course, is getting more people into the UC Student Association space. A lot of slow it down.
Your time's lost.
Your next question is, the 2025 to 2026 academic year will precede the 2026 midterm elections and a number of important statewide elections. The following is a two-part question. How will you increase, alongside campus partners, civic engagement and student voter participation during this critical time? Jared, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, of course. So I don't want to, of course, repeat myself too many times, but a lot of my campaign, a lot of my focus is on civic engagement. So I was kind of saying earlier, establishing those town halls, creating a second voting center on campus because a lot of our voting times are people wait like hours in line just to vote. Establishing a vote coalition to provide funding for RCOs to really engage in these on-campus voting campaigns, and kind of like getting the ball rolling with that. So that's why I kind of want to provide and kind of really incorporate these initiatives. I think it's especially important to kind of establish a relationship within those RCOs as well. So that's how I would think around this one. Of course, then having that communication, especially because at the local level, the Irvine City Council will likely have an election in sometime in the year within the new day. That's the best.
Adam, same question. How would you increase, alongside campus partners, civic engagement and student voter participation during this critical time?
Yeah, I think like Jerry said, we've been talking for pretty much this whole debate about increasing civic engagement. But I do think that there are additional ways that we can go and push this, especially in the lead up to the midterms. I think one of the things that I'd like to see is getting more students aware of and involved in mail-in voting. I think because so many students don't like have their permanent address nearby, and are instead from out of state or from other parts of California, they tend to lean towards mail-in voting, and by providing better services for mail-in voting, such as within the mail rooms within our dorms, for example, I think having stuff set up there in order to make students aware of the fact that they can mail-in vote and having like registration for mail-in voting set up there would be really helpful in increasing voter turnout. Thank you.
Given proposals like the STATE Act, which would require documented proof of citizenship to register to vote, prevent the use of commonly held IDs like military, tribal, or driver's licenses, and create additional barriers for individuals who have changed their names, how would you ensure that all undergraduate students can access the ballot and stay informed? Adam, you may answer this question first.
Yeah, I think it's really important that all students who are eligible to vote do, and I think that the best way to do this is to get voter registrations into people's hands. I think that there's just a lot of students that I know in my personal life, especially those who aren't like part of the poli-sci community, who aren't registered to vote, and they just don't really go out there and do it. And so, especially in terms of these, I think we need these issues. We need to advocate at a state level for increased support for students who say I may have changed their name due to their gender identity, or to students who are of like recently become citizens or like naturalized citizens. I think that at the state level we can do a lot more to advocate for these students and to make sure that they are aware of the resources that they have to be able to vote. Thank you.
Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course. So I think these would fall, of course, under like different jurisdictions depending on how you examine the issue. But one of them would be to lobby, of course, especially because voter ID laws have caused a lot of voter suppression, especially within disadvantaged communities already. So that's kind of like why we want to also, of course, establish a vote coalition, incorporate the voices of like a lot of underserved students who generally don't get these opportunities to really speak on and have these discussions. Too, I would like to lobby at the state level, of course, and kind of like change state ID verification laws, because of course, like a lot of disenfranchised communities like literally don't have the right or the access to vote. And I think by starting locally and organizing locally, to allow these people, or like just to allow people in general to work and to vote, would be beneficial, such as reaching out to nonprofits or
Your time is elapsed. Thank you for your responses.
The next question is, executive orders at the state and federal level often have significant impacts on students and higher education. How would you interpret and respond to executive orders, as well as students are informed, empowered, and protected through your advocacy? Chair, we'll begin with you.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Of course. The question is, executive orders at the state and federal level often have significant impacts on students and higher education. How would you interpret and respond to executive orders, as well as ensure students are informed, empowered, and protected through your advocacy?
Yeah, of course. So this comes through a variety of initiatives. One, doing outreach to a lot of boards and reaching out to state legislators in general. That's something that we can do with the UC Student Association space. Reaching out to legislators to co-sponsor bills that kind of counter these bills that are meant to disenfranchise a lot of students in higher education, especially because higher education right now is at an inflection point under a lot of threats when it comes to cuts of funding and stuff of that nature. So I would like to advocate for a lot more funding, and that's something that I've been doing at our different lobby days, advocating for reallocating funds for basic needs, allocating funds for Cal Grant expansions to include a lot of more non-traditional students. So because of course a lot of like students' rights are like on the edge almost, really establishing those relationships with a lot of our offices and relying a lot of our district offices to enact that change, and that way we can run for the state and federal levels.
For your response, same question.
Yeah, I think that the way that particularly federal executive orders have been used recently is definitely a major threat to students on campus, and the independence of our universities. And that's why I feel like one of the main things is that we need to make our UC system more independent from the federal government, because the reason why the federal government has this kind of influence over us is the amount of funding that they have, and they can threaten to cut it if we don't acquiesce to their demands. So that's why I think it's important to promote state level and corporate funding for the university and to expand our investment portfolio in order to gradually move out of our reliance on federal funding, because unfortunately, so long as our system is reliant on federal funding, the president can decide to just unilaterally remove that funding if we do something that he doesn't like. Thank you.
Thank you for your responses. Your next question is, in 2023, UCI established a Police Accountability Board, PAB, modeled after one implemented at UC Davis. As a representative on the PAB, how will you ensure that trust and accountability is upheld between the student body and the UCI Police Department? Adam, we may start with you.
Yeah, I think that a strong relationship between UCI as an org, the students, and the UCPD is really important to establish and maintain. I think that having this board that functions as an oversight is very important, and I think that it should be expanded and empowered in order to deal with situations where people feel like the UCPD has overstepped its bounds. I think that while we're overall very grateful to the UCPD for its service in keeping our campus as one of the safest among the UC system and among colleges in America in general, it's very important that they understand that they are here to serve us, not us to serve them, and thus that they have certain boundaries that they can't cross and they can't violate. Thank you.
Jared, same question.
Yeah, of course. So for me, I would like to do a lot of outreach to our advocacy boards, especially because they have extensive knowledge on kind of like that pipeline between students and police and, for example, like our prison systems. So doing a lot of outreach to our orgs, of course, and using them, like, not using, but like kind of gaining guidance from them and developing recommendations for the Police Accountability Board and providing those recommendations, of course, with UCIPD. That way, a lot of student safety and a lot of student rights aren't violated. Something that I also like to incorporate is incorporating these discussions into our town halls. I talk a lot about establishing these quarterly town halls, but I cannot emphasize the importance of actually getting student feedback and getting student input when it comes to these important discussions. And that's all I have.
Thank you for your responses, candidates. We are now reaching the end of our scheduled program, so with that, we will have a 1 minute, 30-second closing statement. from each candidate, starting with the chair.
Yeah, of course. I kind of reiterated earlier, but a lot of our higher education institutions are at an inflection point. A lot of students have expressed that their rights might be violated or that they will feel disempowered. And even though we currently disempower students to the right of place, it's more than ever important to kind of safeguard and work at the state level, the local level, and at the federal level to safeguard these rights. And so, of course, that's something that I do with our lobbying initiatives and actually getting student feedback. And just because of that, I think a lot of students have also requested a lot of new leadership initiatives from ASUCI. So I'd like to bring a lot of that groundwork into ASUCI data that I have learned from other organizations and being in grassroots mobilizing and bring that forward to our office. But just to reiterate, I am really with Andrew. Also, you can check us out on Instagram. You can check us out on our Linktree website.
Thank you for your closing statement. We will now have a 1 minute 30-second closing statement from Adam.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, first of all. But I think that today we've seen kind of like two different visions for ASUCI's role as the student government. And we've seen, on one hand, a vision that's focused on empowerment and the disempowerment that the university does, and another one that's focused squarely on, I feel like, issues that affect not just individual groups of students, but on the entire student body as a whole. Issues that hit their pocketbooks, that hit their student loans, that hit their parking costs. And so I feel like I want you all in the audience and anybody listening at home to think about what issues affect you the most and what you feel is most important to you. And I'm also running as part of a slate called Anteater Rising. We're a movement that's in focusing on targeting these issues that we think are the ones that affect students the most and are the ones that have the largest effect on the most students. And if you feel like these issues of financial aid, of parking costs, of your student well-being are the issues that you feel are really important, are the ones that are hurting you, and the ones that you'd like to see fixed, please vote for us come week 3. Thank you.
Thank you for your closing statements, candidates. This concludes the ASUCI External Vice Presidential Debate. At this time, if our candidates would like to offer a brief 10-second farewell, we'll begin with Jared and we'll move on.
Of course, just thank you everyone for showing up and showing out. I appreciate everyone who came through, and I wish all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for showing up. To anybody who's watching on there's a live stream, right? Yeah. And vote for Anteater Rising. Thank you.
With that, please give our candidates one final warm round of applause as they exit the stage. With that, the 2025 ASUCI External and Academic Affairs Vice Presidential Debates come to a close. This event is the third of 4 we are hosting this week. 2 back in tomorrow, same time, same place, to watch our presidential and internal vice presidential debates. As a reminder, voting will officially begin on the elections website, elections.uci.edu, next Monday, April 14th at 9 a.m. and Friday, April 18th at 5 p.m. All undergraduate students, regardless of year, major, immigration status, etc., are entitled to vote in these elections. If you have any questions or concerns regarding these elections, please feel free to reach out to our team at elections@asuci.uci.edu. On behalf of the Elections Commission, ASUCI, and University, we hope you will engage with the student government and the future of our university by voting for candidates who reflect your values, your hopes, and your aspirations. Thank you for watching. See you on the elections trail. Have a good evening.